So this week we're working a lot on materials. If we looked at the whole week as kind of like a view, we would see that we're starting out with physical materials. And you're going to do an example today, this activity. And what we're going to be doing throughout the week is you're going to be doing some materials on some different things that you build and add materials to. I'm going to talk just briefly on Wednesday, which is asynchronous. You'll learn a little bit about this different shading methodology. And we're going to be revisiting one of our old projects and doing more with it with some really cool materials, as well as setting up a virtual studio, which when combined with physical materials, lights and a camera, makes for some real eye-catching pieces that come out of your portfolios. So let's focus for the day on this activity. And important things to understand about this is I don't want you to jump in and try to download the sample file from the YouTube video. So what I've done here is I've put one on a drive that you can access when you're logged in. And that drive that's up here is also known as the game programming drive. We use the letter I for the game programming drive, and we use the letter H for the one that's your student drive. You're going to save your work on the H drive, but you're going to get the work from the I drive. The reason I'm pointing that out to you is if you try to save your work on the I drive, it's not going to work. You're going to get an error message on that. So be mindful of it. I'll run over that again in a minute. You are going to be working on two different letters. They're initials, not F and L, unless your name happens to start with F and last name starts with L. Those letters need to be whatever your last name is. The F and L are just placeholders for first and last name. In order to do so, you're also going to be introduced to changing your render settings, and you're also going to be changing your viewport configuration. So there's more to it than just throwing some physical materials on something and saying I'm done. The process that we're going through is going to teach you some specific outcomes, so I want you to stay focused on that. There is a rubric, and your work, if done properly, will show that you've met the rubric, which should be here. If it's not, I'll link one for you. It's pretty easy to do. It's in that same folder. So now that you're actually in the lab, connected to it, you can get to these same drive letters that I'm talking about. Remoting is just going to make a world of difference for what you can do here. So just like you can attach your activities, you'll go into your network drive, which in this case I'm grabbing the I drive, and I know where this is. I'm just going to click in, and project we're on is called Physical Materials, which came out 3 or 4 years ago, and it ties right in with the Unreal Engine and what we're calling physically based rendering, or physically based materials. So almost interchangeably, you can talk about physically based materials and physically based renderings. The game engine that we're going to be using can take most of these materials in, but the names change slightly. And we're also going to work with an intermediary product called Crazy Bump. Crazy Bump's a wonderful tool that happens to be, let's see, how do I say it? I want to use the term shareware, but it's basically something you can pay a guy to use, and it does so much for you. It's well worth it. Within the educational parameters, I'm going to have you try it and understand that if you're going to start making money on it, then I think this guy deserves to be paid for a license. If you're making money on it, he's helping you do it. Getting back to today's activity. Now that I do have the rubric here, and I do rubrics regularly, but maybe not as regularly in this particular year. But they're, again, re-highlighting, that's the drive you're going to get. Make sure you save it on your H drive. That's really the first thing you need to do, is save as to your H drive, because anything else you try to do is not going to let you save it back on the I drive. If that makes sense. Let me pause the demo for a minute and do a check for understanding. All right, so I'm going to go back to showing the demo here, and another thing I want you to be aware of, there's perhaps some slight differences in the version that was used in 2017 and what we've got nowadays. So you can't just fly through the video. Now you can pause, rewind, replay, change the speed, be resourceful when you're watching the videos, recordings of me, recordings like this that we're using, be resourceful. So I want you to use this and to practice it. If you get to extra time, there's some ideas here on taking it further. And the rubric is something really worth taking a look at. I put it together so you would know is this good enough? Have I done a fantastic job, like a high score? Did I kind of like, try again versus one that's good enough? So your rendered solution will be turned in, and it should be really, I think, an attractive version if you follow this process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simulate that I'm a student, and I'm going to kind of highlight a couple of the pitfalls that you need to be aware of here. What you're going to be doing is changing the render settings, which the video is going to walk you through. And when you first open up the scene and you've saved it on your H drive, the video is going to walk you through doing a render. And you're going to note that it's set probably to scanline render, as highlighted in yellow here, with a production rendering mode. You're going to update these two things along with one more that's a little bit out of view here. Speaking of being out of view, I'm a little out of view there. So you're going to change them from these options here. And where you're going to end up at is using a render mode called the Art Renderer, right above the box where my head is. And you're also going to change this to iterative rendering mode. A couple of new words there. I mean, we've talked about rendering, but an iterative rendering mode means that it improves as time goes on. The longer it runs, the better it gets. I guess some things get better with time, right? That's true. The other thing is there's a tab down here, which I've got highlighted. You're going to want to move the slider from min or draft, move that over towards max. Make sure max is going to take a really long time to render, right? That's the maximum value. Somebody came up with one that was going to take more than a day to render out at high quality. Later, we can talk about ways to solve that by using more than one computer to help out. But for now, it's fine just to be aware of it. The next thing you're going to be doing that, again, varies a little bit from the video. So pay attention to these heads ups here. In fact, I want to make sure I get everybody's attention. So I'm going to grab the lab for a minute. I'm going to go into demo mode. So I just want to make sure that now that I believe everybody's logged in, that I can just do a demo and show my screen. Now, I did this earlier, and there was somebody from first session that were still logged on in third session, and they weren't really connected to the conference. They got a little surprised. Let me know if you're in and you're still trying to use. So on the current version, where it says user defined, you're going to come down to extended viewports and slide over to active shade. Now, every time you render, it might change. As long as you get the idea of how to use this viewport option, it's a lot better than having to do a render every time you want to see a change. So please be aware of that. Public chat's got a couple of comments. Let me jump on that. Yeah, there you go. So wine and maybe high school teachers get better with age. I'm not sure. At least some of them. All right. Hopefully I'm still recording here. I'm going to open up 3ds Max. And as you follow along in the instructions, it's going to guide you, again, as I've hopefully covered pretty well here, is you're going to grab this scene called physical material. And the first thing you're going to want to do is save your own copy on your H drive. So that's like a 1-2 thing just to get set up. And then we're going to pause for a minute. We're going to look at what the scene looks like. We're going to talk about what we see. I believe you're going to see 4 viewports showing 4 different views of the scene. And there's what we call a sample. It's a piece of geometry that is designed to hold a material and show it off in a way that you can see what it looks like on a spherical shape, as well as on angles that are 90 degrees, almost like steps. In fact, here it is. So before you do anything else here, and if you haven't, please do the following. Click on the word File and do a Save As. Save it onto your H drive. Now you can come down here where it says File Name, and you could type in the letter H, colon, and a backslash. That's the same as typing in or finding under this PC, finding your ID number for the drive. So once you got that set up, you're going to want to type in something like, physical material start, something like that. I'm going to call this one physical material example 3, because this is for session 3. Now that it's yours, you can start to change it. No harm, no foul. So there is something in here that actually is called, among other, by design, read this and delete it. So there's a text object here that I'm going to highlight. Now, quick heads up. If you go to change a piece of text, which you're going to do a little bit later in your letter, go to the Modify panel. So I'm going to move myself over to the Modify panel. It's the one that looks like a bent line with 4 corners here. And you'll notice if it's text or text plus that it might have, these are actual instructions. It reminds you to save it first. Well, now that we're done looking at that, we're going to delete it just by highlighting it over here on the left-hand side and pressing the delete key. And it's gone. So once we delete this, delete. I keep ending up clicking so many times. I'm just going to right click here and do select delete if I can here. What am I doing wrong? Unfreeze all. Okay, that would be the reason why. Read this and delete it. Wonderful. Demo Gremlin. I'm going to use W for move mode. Click on the text so it's selected. I must have my selection locked. This is good. It's good when I have problems in lab here. Oh, looks like it's gone. I don't see read this and delete it now. Let me update my view here by doing a shift Q for a render, which is something they're going to have you do in the video as well. I got a feeling I'm dealing with a little bit of lag with all of the software I'm running here. Close out of a few things. That did not seem to help. I renamed it to W. Thank you, Eddie. Appreciate that. So I don't think it's frozen. I did get to delete, and it is gone. All right. So the next thing that's kind of in the way, but I want you to realize that they're there. So this is not in the tutorial, but it's a cool feature, is the F and the L I've put into a selection list, new concept for you. But look at the top bar here for a second and see where it says create selection set. What I'm going to do is drop it down and you'll see there's a group called student initials. So they're both selected. Now to get rid of them so they're not in the way, I'm going to click on the eyeball next to either one of them. And because they're in the same selection set, they're gone. They're not deleted, but they're no longer visible. So as you proceed to work on the main sphere, you're not going to be distracted by the initials. And then when it's time for you to add your initials per the rubric, you can then get back into the same selection set here. And you can click on the initials. It's okay. And from that point, they'll show up again. So by design, I've got them in a selection set that you can use. That's a clue, by the way, that in the Scene Explorer, you can do things like freeze, rename, look at groups, and select by name just by double-clicking. So all useful things to be aware of. All right, so you're going to follow the instructions. It's going to result in a demonstration that walks you through a process where when you do a render in your 3ds Max, you'll see it done based on whatever your render settings are. At this point, it's looking from the top. What I want to do here, you can't do anything. Right. All right. So here's the deal. I've got myself in demo mode, and just before I turn you loose in the lab, let me tell you what I'm going to do here is I just want to point out one more thing before I turn you loose. When you're watching these videos, there's 2 things that are slightly different. One of them is the render settings. So if you click on the teapot up here with the gear, this is where you're going to get in and you're going to change this to the art render. It's probably going to be scanline. So make sure you change that to art render. And make sure you change it from production to iterative. And then on this tab here, move this up from draft to something. I mean, high is fine, I'm sure. So that when you render it out, and this is a really cool thing, not from this viewport. If I look from the physical camera and I render, the details get painted in quickly, and then it adds more and more details over time. Gets better over time. Remember that whole phrase? So that's why we're doing this. Now, instead of having to move this thing around, there's 2 videos. The 5-minute video is going to walk you through the option on how to set up a viewport. And that one, I'm just going to hit stop and cancel on that render, is going to show you how to change a viewport, such as this one here, where it's going to go from user defined. I'm going to drop down here to active shade using art render. Now, the view on this box might change slightly depending on what you did last. So now it's using the art render as the viewport. So if I make a change to the lighting, or if I move the camera, or if I move an object, you're going to see it re-render that frame, and it's going to increase with accuracy. That's it. That's the main things I want you to see. Have fun with this. I'm going to stop this demo for now, and I'm going to give you guys a chance to do hands-on time. Ask questions. All right? I'm going to drop the demo and give you access to the lab.